Okay, doing a quick test as I look for my live. There we go. It says it's scheduled for 1:32. What? Let's see. It looks like my mic is going out just a little bit, so here we go. I usually talk around this level, so just a teeny bit down more. We'll see if that works. Who is messaging me? Midge is messaging me. I don't know why it does that. Okay, I'm gonna go listen to myself and see how that has turned out. Teeny bit down more. We'll see if that works. Who is messaging me? Midge is messaging me. I don't know why it does that. Okay, I like that you can hear Minecraft in the background. But it sounds like it's working. So let's see. Going to here's not looking at any of the shit just yet. Why is that so bright? Okay, yes. Hi, Molly. I'm currently trying to figure out what. I don't know how people do it normally, but I post everything in while I am, whatchamacallit, working on got the stream thing up. Let's see. So I put everything in all the places it's going to be, so now I can make this viewable. Oh, come on, there's a game right here. Yeah, that's what I thought. Piece of shit. Ignore me cursing out my own fucking computer. It's fine. Everything is fine. Let's see. Also, I have new headphones, and they are really, really good at the sound canceling thing, so if there's anything going on in the background, whoops, that's not what I meant to hit, then let me know, because I can't hear. I did turn off my, yes, this is my, this is a hardcore world that I started with my last stream. I think I'm missing just a few minutes of the very start because I didn't know what I was doing. But my goal in this world is I'm going to convert this village into my home base and hopefully not die. That's pretty much the only goal. I figure Minecraft is good because I can kind of sort of dual task. I can talk about stuff at the same time as I'm working on things in here. But if I end up dying while trying to talk about something serious, I may switch to my other world, which is a little bit further ahead. Whoops. Did not mean to do that. Okay, so I feel a little disingenuous wanting to talk about writing when I haven't been writing very much recently. I think I've written all of 200 words in the past 2 weeks, which is not that great, but I know it's depression because I have the bipolar is in the downswing, so that's not helping. And then there's roommate drama going on that is making me more stressed out. And until yesterday, I was stressed out about some stuff with work, the usual. So it feels a little disingenuous to be talking about it, but at the same time, I am a writer. I consider myself pretty semi-professional, so I kind of want to talk about it. How would I write negative 10 words is my question. Like, would I have written 10 and then delete them? That would take me back to 0. How do... You've given me a thought problem, actually. No, I mean, I can see you popping up in the corner of my thing, and I don't... Last time I had all of 2 viewers at the most, and I'm not really expecting anything more. I'm streaming mostly because it helps me get back in the headspace, and it will give me something to eventually edit. So, you're okay. This is just me rambling, and whenever I do finally make a video, I am going to try and make it so that it actually makes sense. Which, you know, that's the point of a video, right? Be shorter and more coherent. And I broke another shovel. But I've been thinking a lot about writing. It's because I have been writing a lot until recently. And I also have been reading a lot. Thank you. My voice is... This is pretty much how I always speak. I may be a little more flat at work because I get tired from the socialization. People constantly ask if something is wrong because I have the flattest face and I speak like this pretty much. And it's like, no, I am fine. I am just, this is my normal speaking voice. And my only goal here is to get you out of the store as quickly as possible. I can talk about the store thing a little bit. It was me being paranoid again. It's the fun part of bipolar, and I kind of wish there was more bipolar characters who dealt with psychosis, because then I would have caught it earlier on, I think. But my psychosis is spiraling, everything has to go wrong, and there's a lot of paranoia in the delusions. Someone at work stole 4 bottles of Gain laundry detergent. And they caught it on the camera, and when one of the managers was looking at the camera, he was like, we can see the dude looking at you, Icarus, the entire time, trying to figure out if you're going to notice him or not. And I was reading on my book. On my book. I was reading on my phone. Like I said, I've been reading a lot, because I've been reading Discworld a lot, which is very fascinating writing style in my opinion. Something I want to talk about when I'm past story time. And I am also rereading Fire and Blood, because I rewatched House of the Dragon Season 1, and then I watched Season 2. I need to, like, rewatch now that I have headphones to actually properly hear. My desktop computer has maybe the world's shittiest speaker system, and I don't have the time, patience, or money right now to try and find a decent speakers to use. But that's besides the point. I was on my phone, and my work has a no phone policy at the register, and I just have spent since Friday being extremely anxious, convinced I was going to lose my job because I was on my phone, and you can see that I was on my phone. So if they were looking at the thief and trying to figure out who he was and how this happened, they would see me on the phone. And I was like, I don't really like that very much. I'm going to get fired. But I literally ran into the store manager twice at work yesterday because he hadn't clocked out yet. And when I say literally ran into him, I was coming out of one aisle, and he was walking across in front of the registers. And I literally almost smacked right into him. I basically T-boned him. And then the second time, we have this little closet where the the supervisor, the front end supervisor, can hand us our till for the day, and we get like $200. We're supposed to count it and make sure we've got all the money that we are supposed to start with before we go to our register and put that in. And so I just finished counting my till and made sure that I had all my money. It was all sorted and facing the correct way because it has to face the correct way. And for some reason, Adriana, my coworker, loves to put the bills facing the wrong way. We fight about it. It's fine. It's fine. It's all in good fun, honestly. But I just finished that, and I opened the closet, and I nearly hit him in the face with it. So I think I'm going to be okay at work, and tomorrow we usually get the schedule digitally anyway. So by this time tomorrow, I should feel like totally sane again on that front. Anyway, like I said, I have been reading a lot, and reading stories is a really smart way. Or really, it's kind of the only way that you should. How do I word this in a way that doesn't sound egoist? That is a good question, Icarus. How do you do stuff? How do you talk? What are words? We could go really existential if we wanted to, but we're going to try to avoid that too much. Reading is generally a good idea to try. If you want to be a writer, if you want to be a serious writer, it's a good idea to read, and not necessarily just in the genre that you're writing in, but broadly. Which means I get to read a lot of random romances. You're coming in to steal my bed, aren't you? Yeah, I know you are. But only I can skip the night. But it's a good idea to try and read broadly, both within whatever genre you're interested in, as well as just pretty much anything that you can get your hands on that you find vaguely interesting. Bitch. No, dude, stop walking in front of me. I don't want to get taken out by a freaking iron golem of all things. I don't care. So I've been reading, like I said, I've been reading Discworld. I've been wanting to read Discworld for a while, especially because, like, it is kind of one of the big book series that are super popular, and it's a long book series, so you get to see, like, how Terry Pratchett evolved as a writer over time. So I felt like that was very important. And I'm thinking actually, of making a series of book reviews as I go through Discworld. I'd have to start reading over again, and making sure that I read it in the right order, which is publication order. I started with the Death series to make sure that I would be interested in the writing, and I am. So then I started reading in publication order, and it's been fascinating the way that he jumps around. And, like, his first book was actually half of a book. I don't know why. Yes, book reviews. I think it would be cool to have book reviews of the Discworld series in particular, because you always hear good things about it. But I haven't really seen any book reviews that I particularly found helpful in learning about the series. So having someone that is either reading through it for the first time or is still very new to the series, giving details on what's happening, I think would be handy. I also think I need to, like, actually rent them from the library instead of just reading them from a not entirely legal website. My problem is I do read very, very quickly, and Terry Pratchett's writing style is conducive for that. Because something I've noticed, Terry Pratchett is, when he's writing, especially since I'm still under volume 10, I just finished Guards, and I think that's number 9. So we're talking like 1980s-ish. But I noticed even when reading through the Death series, getting through all the volumes that are specifically centered on Death as a protagonist, he tends to be a little more sparse in his writing style, where some people can write paragraphs on paragraphs of character description and world description and everything like that. He kind of lets you leave it up to the imagination. If you're familiar with Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, I also liken some of the descriptions that he writes to be similar to that. Not quite so fourth wall breaking, I would say, as A Series of Unfortunate Events, where Lemony Snicket will literally turn himself into a character, or he will talk to the reader like, as you know, this is what this means, and then gives you a sort of simile. I'll say simile, metaphor, something like that. Analogy, example. Example is the word I'm looking for. Lemony Snicket will then give you an example of what he's talking about, just because he is aware that his audience that he's writing for tends to be younger, and he's using words that... Seriously? Why am I so bad at that? He tends to use words that aren't exactly expected in even in English as a primary speaker vernacular. So having those examples, I've always admired Lemony Snicket's writing style too. It's very expressive and evocative of like this sort of mood that he's trying to give. It feels like a pseudo documentary, but aimed for children and focused on the story of these children who are just going through a series of unfortunate events. I need to see if he's actually written anything else. I don't know off the top of my head. But when I'm reading Discworld, I kind of get similar vibes. Not in the explaining things for a younger audience sort of way, but where Pratchett is sparse on things like character descriptions, using only like a couple of evocative lines to describe a character, like Sybil Ramkin being very, very tall and very, very large, and then he focuses mostly on how she dresses and how she decides that, because Sybil Ramkin is a noble lady in the large city Ankh-Morpork. I'm so mispronouncing that. I'll look up how to pronounce it correctly when I'm doing actual book reviews, but she's a noble lady in this city, and so she's expected at times to go out, dress up, play the part of a noble lady, but she also raises these creatures called swamp dragons. And they're not like regular dragons that you would see in, like, Game of Thrones. They are basically combustible skin bags that are of gas, flammable gas, that's one bad move away from exploding. And she raises them as, like, household pets. But I can remember that she's large and she's broad, and she will dress up if she needs to, and she actually tries to alter how she dresses to impress Vimes, who is the city watch captain. But everything about like how she dresses, how she looks in that regard, it's focused on like her doing something to her appearance. We're not just like looking in a mirror staring at her as a character. I don't know like what her eye color is. I don't know how big she is. I don't know like what her makeup routine is, but I do know that she tries to wear makeup and she doesn't do a great job at it when she's trying to impress the man that she's interested in. And I know that she doesn't care about her wardrobe that much, because she'll just like go out in her nice silk dress and then go muck out the stable for her babies, her swamp dragons. And that's the type of writing style that I love, and I love to emulate, where you're given just enough information to build the picture in your own head, as opposed to, say, what's something else I'm reading currently? Oh, Cemetery Boys. So I really like Cemetery Boys. It is, well, I say that. I don't like it as much as I wish that I did, if that makes sense. It has all the pieces that should be very interesting to me. It is a story of a young trans man he lives in LA. He lives in LA, and his family are essentially like guardians of the cemetery, and he has to help take care of the ghosts that live there and help them pass. He is Mexican American, so the culture is very heavily focused on uh, Mexican culture, Mexican American culture, especially out in LA, as well as uh, Catholic, a bit of Catholic, and then a bit of like, what would you call it? Occultism, a little bit of occultism, because they do rituals and stuff. So it's not like the typical white English Catholicism. It's very, very centered on Mexican Catholicism, essentially. I know words. And his trans identity is important to the work in the fact that he wants to do something. He wants to be a man in his family business instead of a woman, but no one believes that he could do it, so he kind of sets off most of the plot by going off and doing it on his own, and then summoning a ghost that he was hoping would be his missing cousin, but it's not. It's a murdered boy from his school. He ends up getting a crush. So it's got everything that I want. It's got queerness, explicit queerness, that is relevant to the plot without necessarily being torture. It is focusing on a minority that isn't, like me, where, it's focusing on a different culture that I may not be overly familiar with, so I get to learn about it and treating it as important while still also making it its own thing. And it's about ghosts and gay ghosts and all of that stuff. And it's like, I should like this, but I don't. And I clocked onto the fact that it is. Oh, let me go to sleep. I clocked onto the fact that the person writing it is a Tumblr user, just from how they were writing. And it's not just from using the X as a gender neutral signifier in Spanish. It was also just like the way that they would work on. Is this even going to be safe? I feel like I'm going to put myself in a danger going down here. But the way that the writer does character descriptions is extremely frustrating. And there's a bit of fanficky-esque, which I realize that totally makes sense as language. It's not bad. Gay Ghost is literally my favorite. I think you would like it, Molly. Even with the Latinx stuff. But, no, it is good. It is very good. I think it deserves the praise that it's gotten, and I don't regret having it, and I do plan on finishing it eventually. Like, it's not a bad book. The fact that I just keep getting distracted from reading it by reading everything else probably doesn't speak well, but, I mean, it's not a bad book. It's a good book. And it's especially good at what it's doing. I recognize a lot of writing quirks that feel like it comes from Tumblr and from writing fan fiction. And one of the things that has been frustrating me a little bit is the whole kind of repeating information each chapter. Okay, then maybe you shouldn't watch it. Read it. Because, yeah, the Latinx... This is the book, this is why I was asking you, and I was asking my coworker, my Honduran coworker, about y'all's feelings about the gender-neutral stuff. Well, I mean, I think I also low-key write a little Tumblr-esque. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with being able to clock where someone spends their time socially through their writing. it's just also like the character descriptions are just a little too much for me. In the same breath of everything, I had a coworker of mine, 19-year-old Angela. She she read it first because she was curious about it, and I told her a teeny bit about it, and she read the whole thing. She really liked it. She read it in about a month, which is impressive because she was only reading it at work. So, again, it's not a bad style. It's just personally, I like the Discworld where talking about character looks are a minimum, where I'm not being told, like, what does this person's jawline look like, apropos of nothing. And some of it makes sense, even as I'm saying this, because, again, gay ghost, gay witch, he is experiencing attraction to the ghost, so he would notice things like the physicality of his, I hesitate to say body because he doesn't have a body in the story. But there are just other little things. Like, there's a character in there who is very much uwu. I am a small being that must be taken care of, and I am going to be willing to put myself in danger because I cared so much about the person who died. And it would be one thing, but it feels a little overwrought, in my opinion. And then we get into the fact that I also read stuff like Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is its own. I think everyone can agree Game of Thrones is kind of. It can be a bit of a mess. Because it is very good. I personally really like Game of Thrones, and I think if I didn't, why would I be doing a reread of Fire and Blood, which is just a textbook, an in-universe textbook for Game of Thrones. Or not a textbook, a history book, basically. Okay, where is this zombie? Where are you, sir? And are you able to get up here? Good. You stay down there. I want nothing to do with you in hard mode. Especially, yeah, I've got basically no armor. Okay, so I am saying all this stuff. And I'm saying I'm kind of 50-50 on this book series. Or, it's not a series, it's a book. He has gone on to write series. But this specifically is a single book. But I do read Game of Thrones. I do like Game of Thrones. I like it enough that I am rereading an in-universe history book on the Targaryen family. The Targaryens are the royal dynasty that combined Westeros into one kingdom, if you're not familiar. Game of Thrones, and George R. R. Martin has his own problems. Mostly in the he wants to realistically depict on how things might have been in that time period, how hard things would have been for the small folk, aka the commoners, and and as well as women. Because, for instance, in Fire and Blood, there's a lot of focus on dynasty and children, and we see these girls being married to older men, and the person who's writing the book in universe is talking about how, like, one character, Dela, got pregnant when she was like 18 to her 30-year-old husband, and she ends up dying because she was already so frail and sickly, and she was scared of everything, and her body just couldn't handle it. We also have a forced cesarean with Queen Alyssa, I believe, where her husband, Queen Alyssa, her husband was told that it was very likely that both her and the baby were going to die. This looks like it's going to be a thunderstorm, so let's sleep through it. Why is the cat hurting? Where's the cat? How? How did... Yeah, it's a thunderstorm. Let's go to bed. Thunderstorms can summon monsters, so that's why we're allowed to sleep through them. Cool. Yep, see? Here we go. Freaking zombie. Nice. I won. He was already on fire, but it's fine. Anyway, so Queen Alyssa married like 3 times, I think, and in her 40s, she got pregnant again to her husband, who is a Baratheon. Baratheons and Targaryens have pretty much a long history. It's not the most important part of the story, but I'm trying to make sure I remember things properly. You are a pretty cat. No, come back here. I want to admire you. Okay, fine. And because she was in her 40s, she's already older in Westeros standards, and her body was already pretty spent from getting pregnant so many times before. She had so many children. And her husband ends up being told she struggles. I think they don't talk about what type of birth position it was in, but her story gets inspired for House of the Dragons, and in that part, I believe it was a breech birth, where the baby isn't facing the correct way. And because the baby's not facing the correct way when trying to give birth, that makes it really, really difficult, because like we're shaped to come out a certain way, and if you don't come out that way, you're going to cause a lot of pain. So the maester, the doctor, is basically like, we're trying everything we can. We can try and save mom, but the baby will die. We can try and save baby, but the mom will die. And it's very likely that both of them are going to die. In House of the Dragon, both of them end up dying. In both versions, the husband ends up picking to save the baby versus the saving the mother. Because both versions, there's also this emphasis on save my son. In the history book with Queen Alyssa, we have this, he already had one son, but there's also the heir and a spare idea, where you have to have multiple sons just in case inevitably something happens to them. And in House of the Dragon with Queen Emma, there was no son yet. And so there's this idea of female disposability. Oh, you've seen House of the Dragon? So I continue to just terraform. About half of what I do in Minecraft is just terraforming. It's kind of silly, but I like to do it. But yeah, George R. R. Martin does try to make a focus on the disposability of women and small folk, and also this idea of how the small folk can rise up and take over things. Like, I just got through the portion of the Dance with Dragons where, and this is going to be spoilers for House of the Dragon, but you know what, I don't care. Eventually, the small folk in King's Landing are going to be taken up into a religious fervor by a man called the Shepherd, and they are going to go and attack the dragons that are being kept in the dragon pit in King's Landing, and going to kill them. And that's going to end up wiping out, I believe, almost all of the dragons. I don't remember how the last few die, but it's inevitable that the dragons die out, and that's how it happens, is the small folk are going to go and to try to make things right with their gods, they're going to kill all the dragons, even though so many of them die trying to do so. So there's a lot of that, but there's also, for all the good George R. R. Martin does, and for all the cool themes and things that I think he tries to put into it, and we're not even going to talk about the fact that he's written himself into a corner and he's been struggling with Winds of Winter for years now. And I don't think he's going to be able to finish the book in a way that the series, oh my gosh, there's a freaking, don't like this. Why do you have armor? The one good thing is I've always been so scared of monsters in Minecraft that I kind of know how to cheese it a little bit with most of them. And we get some boots. Protection and unbreaking. That's going to be better smelted, I think. What was I saying? Right, so we're not going to be discussing like how George R. R. Martin's kind of written himself into a corner. I don't think he can finish the story in 2 books like he wants, or if he does, the 2 books are going to be extremely chonky. And considering whatever the last one was, frick, I can't remember, it's been a while, but I think Winds of Winter is already going to be around 800, 900 pages. So who knows what A Dream of Spring will be. Anyway, so not focusing on that, we're focusing on the fact that he writes a lot of stuff in the name of historical accuracy that feels like it borders the line of him trying to make his point and then fetishistic. Because the disposability of girls and women, especially within the nobility, because Game of Thrones is a series about politics, so we end up focusing mostly on the nobility until the small folk become important by interrupting things. But focusing on that disposability, you end up with scenes being written that are sexual assault, and there can be, he has a focus on writing either about food or about women's bodies, and he writes about them in much the same style, where it's very, very focused. So there's definitely room to critique House of the Dragons, not House of the Dragon, because that's not solely his work, but the Game of Thrones series. A Song of Ice and Fire is what I should be calling it, because A Game of Thrones is only the first book, and it is the name of the TV series, which has that not fantastic ending. Admittedly, I've only seen up to season 7 fully. I don't have any memory of watching season 8, so I can't say that I have watched it. But I do know what happens in it, and I do know that it kind of undercuts itself. And that's actually something that we could talk about, is the idea of adaptation when the work that you're adapting isn't finished, because you also see this in Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. When the original 2003 series got released, and for the life of me, I can't remember her name, so what I'm going to do, so I can feel like I'm talking like a smart person. Oh, hello, there are people in the chat. The Blocks Box, Fuck the Logic, and Midge. Everyone, there are people talking in the chat now, Molly, if you want to talk with them too. Apologies, everyone. I don't know how to make it so that I can see this. I'm going to move some things around. Okay, now I can see the chat. So hi, you guys can talk to me. I was talking to Molly. Molly's been beeping me in Discord instead of talking in the chat, so I apologize for that. But yes, now I can see y'all. You are not going to be ignored. I am going to now look up the person's name. Hirumo Arakawa. So Arakawa. I will call her Arakawa. So talking about adaptations and adapting a work before it's finished. Okay, butter chicken is delicious. I am hungry. I have a sandwich for later. But I'm still amused at the fact that I thought you, the first time you told me about butter chicken, I thought you were literally putting butter on chicken. And I was like, that sounds like it's good. And you're like, no, Icarus, it's curry. And it's like, oh. um, Crap. The dead silence is good for me when I have to go and edit again. And I am going to be editing these down, I promise. I haven't touched the other one yet because life is a fucking butt, but I will be. Probably after I go to the Ren Fair in October. And I'll start trying to release them. I'll be trying to release an edited video at least once a month. While streaming once a week, so it'll give me plenty of, like, backlog. Anyway, okay, I remember what I was talking about. Adaptations. I'm talking about Game of Thrones and using Full Metal Alchemist as an example. So in 2003, when the first Full Metal Alchemist came out, Arakawa hadn't finished the manga yet. And she gave them permission to just kind of go with it, do what they will. And admittedly, I don't like the 2003 version as much as the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the adaptation that's more faithful to the overall series. Nope, still can't sleep. I think it is because when I read the book, or read the manga in 2010, it was already finished. We're ignoring the fact that I'm looking this up. And you guys can't see what I'm doing. Published by Square Enix to 2010. Did it finish in 2010? Wow. Okay, so I must have read it right when the last few chapters were finishing up. That's kind of funny. That's funny timing. Because I remember I was reading it in... This is a fun story. So, for people who don't know, I grew up in Alabama in a public school system, so there wasn't a whole lot going on, and I decided I wanted to be a doctor. Best extra class to take in order to do better as a doctor? Latin. They didn't offer Latin, so I was taking an online course, and it was boring, and I wasn't learning anything. So I stopped actually taking my classes, and I just started reading manga, and that's where I first started reading manga. This is back in like 2009, 2010, so they didn't have the... Not only were the scanlation sites more easy to find, but they also didn't have them completely blocked. So that was always fun. But yes, I read Full Metal Alchemist in like 2010, 2000... I'm going to stick with 2010. 2009, 2010. So apparently, I got to the end chapters right after they were being scanned and translated into English. I'm actually pretty surprised by myself. So I read that series, and then I tried to watch the adaptation, the 2003 adaptation, and I didn't like it. Because it's changed from the original. I haven't actually tried to watch the 2003 version past episode 10 in the past few years. Oh yeah, more Lawless, for sure. There's something to talk about, like, there's so many things I want to talk about. I'm going to try and finish this thought before I move on to the next one, because the Lawless Land stuff, tying back into Lily Orchard, and thinking about how she had her sort of change of heart in what she writes and how she presents herself online. It ties pretty neatly back into when we had the porn cleanup and like, I don't care, I wasn't trying to get to you, in 2014. But that's a different thought for later, when I do try and talk about Lily Orchard. For now, what was I saying? So I didn't really like the adaptation. I haven't really tried to go back and watch it and try to appreciate it as its own thing. But the important thing, I think, is with that, Arakawa gave them permission to do what they wanted, to continue to adapt it, and not put in the quote-unquote filler, which I think people have lost sight of what filler is supposed to be just over time, because filler is literally meant to be like having an anime catch up to an anime gets developed much more quickly, gets shown much more quickly than a manga, so filler would be used to kind of fill in the dead space while they were waiting for the manga to catch up to the anime. It's not supposed to be about like talking about episodes of that focus on character development or don't focus on the overarching plot. So like early Steven Universe Season 1, where we have the Monster of the Week aesthetic and all that stuff. It's not filler, and it's not meaningless. Yes, filler can also be good. It can also have important character moments, especially character moments that they may not have been able to do in the original comic, in the original manga. But that's not what it is supposed to. Oh my gosh, no. No, I didn't realize you could come up. I don't like this. Okay. I really don't want to die, guys. I've already put in, like, 5 hours of work on this, whatchamacallit. What is this called? This village. Okay, they shouldn't be able to come up anymore. But filler is supposed to be the stuff that they're using to catch up. And FMA, for whatever reason, didn't want to try and do that in 2003. I mean, for whatever reason. This is 2003. She didn't finish the story until 2010. So, yeah, can you imagine, like, 7 years of filler in FMA? That would be a little intense. Even if it was really, really good filler, it would be a little intense. But it's not meant to be, like, character episodes. So going back to Steven Universe, talking about... You can say whatever you want about One Piece. I am a little scared to try and even jump in. Because there's, what, over 1,000 episodes now? It's just too much for my feeble brain to be able to catch up on. I'd end up using it as background noise, and then I'd be on episode 600, and I don't know how I got here. But Steven Universe Season 1 isn't filler. It's establishing the world, it's establishing character dynamics and relationships, and for a story that is so focused on the character relationships and the dynamics between them, and not so much an overarching plot, especially initially, that sort of thing is incredibly important. So when people talk about, like, you can skip most of season 1 up until yeah, there is so much. I can't. And that's why I'm glad that FMA 2003 didn't do it, because too much. But I can't get into One Piece right now. My brain would actually explode. There is... What are words? What are words, Icarus? Going back into existentialism. You can skip the first half of Steven Universe if you want, and you wouldn't necessarily miss too much. But I think to have a better understanding of the story, especially the story that Rebecca Sugar is trying to tell before she got canceled and how to truncate everything into that last season in Steven Universe Future, I think having that as a basis helps, is what I was trying to say. So, 2003, Arakawa gave them permission to do what they wanted. They did what they wanted. They did something a little bit crazy with connecting the FMA universe to our universe. I don't remember exactly how that happened. I just remember feeling very some sort of way about it when I was a 17-year-old edgelord. And then the Brotherhood came out in, I believe, 2011. And they, of course, adapted it more faithfully, quote unquote. But it has its own flaws, too. Like, the reason why I tend to watch up until about episode 10 of the 2003 is it does adapt the early chapters a little more faithfully, a little better, in my opinion, than the 2011 version, the Brotherhood version. I keep saying it's 2011, but I could be lying. Manga, light novel, anime. No, Brotherhood is 2009 to 2010. The Sacred Star of Milos is 2011. Okay. 2009 version. I don't know time. Time's not real. And we're ignoring that it is and that stuff is happening. But let's see. So they kind of made the original to be... Okay, one second. Sorry, Molly is leaving. And Molly never got into... Oh, what is this? Of course I haven't bred any animals. You can clean armor now? You can clean banners? What? I did not know those were things. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, the 2010... What, the scatterbrainness of it all? Because... No, I didn't want to do that. I clicked on the wrong thing. We're good. No, there's not. And I don't think there ever would be, because Lord of the Rings is fascinating in its own right. I wonder if your sister would agree with me that Lord of the Rings feels more plot-driven than character-driven. Because I have this theory that the reason why I personally like A Song of Ice and Fire more than Lord of the Rings, as a reading experience. As a story, I like them both. But as a reading experience, I feel like A Song of Ice and Fire is much more character-driven than Lord of the Rings. And I think that has a lot to do with, like, how the two different authors, like, set everything up. And the different writing styles, because even though they're writing in two different time periods, they're also kind of... Where did my brain go? They're writing in two very different time periods, so the writing styles and the writing conventions of both eras can be radically different. Okay, there we go. I may take this guy and move him down because it's a little too high. But anyway, I'm wondering if your sister would agree with me or disagree, because I've had mixed responses to my pet theory that it well, yeah, Old Guard, because I mean he was writing in that time period. His contemporaries, it was still more plot driven. Like, you can even see it with... I know this isn't necessarily an example that was written in the same time period, because I'm not looking at publication dates right now. But looking at other popular works like Dorian Gray or Dracula, or I would even say limited remembrance of Sherlock Holmes, those feel much more focused on like getting the plot along, and the character development is more secondary, of secondary importance, which isn't a bad thing. I need to make that clear for anybody who's listening, because just because like writing conventions have changed and it's more popular now to write in a way that is focused on characters and putting the characters first. Which reminds me, there was a comment that I wanted to respond to. I'll pull that up in a minute. On my last stream, someone left a very interesting comment that I think is important to this conversation. But just because it's no longer in vogue to write a certain way doesn't mean that you can't write that way and you can't tell a good story. You just gotta know, like, what you're doing. And one of the things that frustrates me with stuff like Lily Orchard's writing tips is that it doesn't really focus on the idea of people wanting to do things their own way. Because she's literally writing these tips like it's just her personal preference. They're not actually tips at all. But let's see. Actually, I'm going to empty this out real quick, and then I'm going to pull that up. Where's that comment? I love how I had this sort of trajectory that I wanted to do, and now we're not doing that at all. And it's fine. You know what? It is totally fine to be what it is. But at the same time, it's just like, wow, you really can't focus to save your life. Let's see. So this comment was from my last stream, and they say, it's Fat Cat 22 Able. I'm still only partway through this video. Oh, they actually gave me permission to use it, so yay, okay. I was about to just use it anyway. And actually, I am going to read it, but I also think it would make sense to, like, now let's undo that. And let's go here. And let's show. And there has to be a way that I can just... I don't know. I don't know if that's super readable. I'm trying. It's fine. But it says, I'm still only partway through this video, but I'll say up front that her point about how characters don't have sexual agency, you made them that way, regarding horny design is so stupid. Like, you might as well say that characters have no agency at all if you want to be that reductionist, which is just not true. Characters are supposed to take on a life of their own, and in my own writing, I found that at a certain point, my role as an author isn't to dictate and control what the characters do so much as it is to figure out what course of action would make the most sense for my characters to take in any given moment. And if wearing horny armor is consistent with the internal logic of the character, there's nothing wrong with that. Lily is just being a sex-shaming Puritan here. I know Lily is a fan of Star Wars, by the way. If we take her logic that horny armor and sex scenes are indicative of the creator being a pervert, then she has to believe that George Lucas is a genocidal maniac because Anakin/Darth Vader slaughtered thousands of people across the galaxy yet was redeemed in the end. She probably doesn't believe this, but it's funny how it sounds like her exact criticism of Rebecca Sugar. She isn't consistent at all, shaking my fucking head. Okay, not wearing my glasses, because I don't wear my glasses when I'm on computers for some reason. So it took me a second to read that properly. But yeah, talking about writing and character-driven stories versus plot-driven stories, this comes up really nicely. This is like, fits in perfectly. And I really don't think I can make this bigger. That upsets me. So, but thinking about this, sorry, I'm testing something. Does that make it bigger? Not really. Whatever. It's fine. Love that you can see some of the stuff that I've read and all the things that are being recommended to me. It's fine. But talking about character-driven stories versus plot-driven stories and thinking about how this here is, I overall agree with this. I think that you can talk about having your characters telling you their story. That is not a bad way to be working on writing. I do think that we also have a bit of a tendency to kind of give them too much of their own agency. I think there is a balance, and this is something that I run into a bit when talking about, say, role playing, is some people will deny any involvement with their character's issues because they're like, oh, my character decided that on their own, so this is, I can't be held responsible for the actions that they did. And that frustrates me because I did for a while try to follow along in that, but I also very much try to be aware. I've discarded that. I've ended up deciding that I'd much rather let my characters figure things out and figure out their personality by throwing them into situations. But I'm also their creator, so I am able to look at something that's being done and be like, no, that's not appropriate for XYZ reason. And a good example of this, I think, would be, let's go through the horny armor design idea. If it makes sense for my character to wear horny armor, but I'm writing a story or I'm making a game that's focused on like 12-year-olds, okay, maybe we dial back the horniness a bit. I think a good example of that being done well is Starfire from Teen Titans, the original Cartoon Network cartoon, versus her DC counterpart, where she canonically wears kind of nothing, and there's a lot of mixed responses about that. I have mixed feelings about it. I think some people do better than others. Some of her modern designs I feel like work really well. You know, since I've got things up here, it helps if I could spell. Like you can see, even this is just showing like her Teen Titan design. And here is a more modern version that it looks like. And you can see some of her more modern, where she is wearing very little out clothing, but it's still kind of covering and giving her a little more agency. With Starfire in her comic book counterpart, I think it's important to realize a lot of it is also framing. Let's see. YouTube is going to see this and just be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? So, like, this is some of her OG design, and it's very skimpy. There's not a lot hiding things, and over the years, people have gone back and forth on, like, more naked, more clothed, more naked, more clothed. And she's supposed to be... I don't know why she doesn't wear more clothing. I don't think it is like a Superman, or not a Superman thing. Superman gets his, like, energy from our sun, so it makes sense for him not to wear clothes, you know? But my sister came in ranting to me about the very delusional fans with extremely parasocial relationships. You need to expand on that while I'm talking about this, Midge, so I know what you're talking about. But when they developed Starfire for a more teenage audience, for a kid audience, they changed her outfit from this to this. And you can... Awesome. She agrees with me. I fucking win in life then. That Lord of the Rings is more plot driven. Oh, this is handy. You can see some of the modernizations since her 2003 incarnation. But Starfire used to be extremely, extremely skimpy. This was her thing. And whether it was good or bad, this was how she was depicted as wanting to dress. they made a conscious decision when they were adapting her for a younger audience to draw her in a more covering outfit. It still very much harkens back to her canon outfit. She's got her little belly showing, she's got some thigh highs and a short skirt. And but compared to the big boob slash belly window and her thighs completely out, and she's also got like her little armband thing and her wrist guards too. I would say this is definitely something that's more appropriate for children, and it was a good conscious decision to dial back like her original design into something that would be more appropriate for a younger audience. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like having your character have agency and letting them take you through the story. And this is very good for character driven stories, but also knowing when to reach in as the creator and being like, okay, I understand that you're like this, but we need to take it back a bit. Another good example would be in my own writing, which I think let's go to my drive. So I've got this book, Irreplaceable Echoes. And I wrote this about 4 years ago now. This is the first draft. I need to go through and I need to reread it. And then one of the things I'm going to do, and I can talk more why later, is just rewrite it from memory. But I remember explicitly that there is a sex scene in here. A sex scene that I wrote because at the time it was like, this is what my characters would be doing. But now that I am 4 years out of it and I know that I am not doing... Now that I'm 4 years away from this draft and I know that my own writing style, I know who I want this to be read by, I don't think I need that sex scene anymore. It wouldn't be appropriate for the people that I would like to read. Not necessarily in a they're too young for it, because I do think there is a conversation to be had about allowing teenagers and young people exploring sexuality in a safe manner. But because while it was a character-driven decision, it's also something that isn't exactly necessary for the story that I'm telling. Okay, so for some reason my sister's Tumblr is recommending real person fiction to her, and she saw a post being, oh, sports stars couldn't read the good fanfic not because of gay sex, but because of the world-shattering therapeutic realizations we write out for them. That is its own bundle of everything. And you know what, since I'm not playing Minecraft right now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull up, because we're talking about, since we're going to talk about sports for a minute. Here's my favorite boy. Can you tell that I live in Philadelphia? Yeah, okay, so sports stars, real person fiction. I have always been a do no harm, take no shit sort of idea, and honestly, there is a little bit of nuance to that where I recognize the fact that you can protest someone choosing to self-harm, but I can't really do anything to stop that. Real person fiction is very much of a gray area, and I grew up in a time where, and with, yes, gritty, I grew up, this was 18 to like 24 years old, with people who were able to say, okay, I know you guys want to write fiction about me. I am not comfortable if you include XYZ. Otherwise, go ham. And a good example would be Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth and, like, Jeff would talk about, like, he's okay if you write any type of fan fiction, just don't include his daughter or his wife, because they weren't part of the company, and they were a part of his personal life. and I would see that be echoed across other small time creators. And so for the most part, yeah, that's kind of where I developed my idea of like real person fiction is okay if it's not taken to the people that it's about. You also have that story that, what is it called? After, the After trilogy that got written and is a Wattpad fan fiction of it's a One Direction Wattpad fan fiction that got turned into a book and then turned into a movie series, and it's a little bit shitty, but it was a Wattpad fan fiction. And there's that rumor that the one dude had a restraining order, but I don't think he actually does. I think he just doesn't like talking about that series or about the author because it makes him uncomfortable for obvious reasons. Writing real person fiction very much aligns with that, and so the fact that your sister is getting a post that are like, oh, they couldn't read this because of the therapy stuff, is like, no, you guys got to realize that even with real people, you're getting a flattened version of them. You're only getting what they wish to show you. Even me right now streaming and giving all my ums, uhs, and going off on tangents like 500 times, this is still a version of me that you're getting is not actually the full version of me. And when I edit it down, you get even more of a edited version of like who I want to present myself as versus who I actually am. And so the sports stars therapy, they may not need what these people are talking about at all. They may be in therapy for other reasons. You could also be totally right, and they need therapy for something, but it doesn't matter because it's not your life. And the fact that these people are being so entitled and talking about like how their writing is so good and need it. And I'm not going to malign fan fiction as a fan fiction writer myself. But there's also a habit within fandoms to flatten characters, fictional or real people. So there needs to be a sort of self-awareness, not that you're writing actual people or these versions of people in your head, but the fact that you're writing a version of a character that you have come to understand, and you may be writing them based off of other people's already flattened versions. A good example would be how people tend to write Sun and Moon from FNAF. They get flattened into a couple of set archetypes. I feel like Solar Lunacy, for all the good that Solar Lunacy is, I did read that when I first got into the DCA fandom myself. But for all the good that it is, it did kind of like set in stone some characteristics that I don't super like. I do, and we have that with the Sun and Moon show, is a piece of fan work that now has people insisting that Sun and Moon are brothers and can't be shipped together, as opposed to other people who may see Sun and Moon as a manifestation of dissociative identity disorder, or they may do ship them, or all of these other nuances. It gets flattened out when, in reality, Sun and Moon especially kind of don't have anything going on with them, and the very little canon that we have kind of contradicts itself with, like, in the books, Moon is always a villain, has always been like this, and they didn't want Moon, but in the security breach itself, we have Moon plushies, and Moon is very popular. So it's like, which one is it? Still Wool and Scott Cawthon. And actually, can I say, while I'm talking about FNAF, Scott Cawthon has pissed me off, and this is beyond the fact that he is a Republican who has donated to Donald Trump a couple of years ago in 2016, and all the mess that caused. Like, I'm sorry, guys. His donations is a drop in the bucket compared to what the people that he supported get regularly. And he's also a Christian white man from Texas. What did you expect him to be? we can look at Scott Cawthon, and I honestly am grateful that he hasn't pulled a J.K. Rowling where he tries to use his fame and his platform to spread his conservative Christian ideology, and he seems to be mostly accepting of people within his fandom. And there's other issues with him too, but it's like him donating to conservative politicians and him donating to Trump doesn't surprise me. It is upsetting to know, but also how their campaigns go and how those campaigns went, and you look at the breakdown of the donations, it's a drop in the bucket. Not talking about that. Talking about the fact that for the 10-year anniversary, we kind of got to hear about Scott Cawthon. The reason why Security Breach is so fucking broken as a story in the game series is because he was scared to tell Stillwool what the story was supposed to be about. So because he was scared of telling Stillwool what the story is supposed to be about, he ended up just telling them to put certain things in to... Here's a thing that's like over, so I can't read the thing, Midge. But wait, all that is true, but my beef with Cawthon is he seems to specifically not allow anybody to be right. No, I agree. I think this lines up with that exactly, actually, because he refused to tell Stillwool the plot of Security Breach. He would tell them where to put things. He told them to put Peapod Afton into the basement, and that's how we ended up with a very nicely designed but what the fuck moment of the Afton Springtrap boss battle. So he wouldn't tell them the plot. He would just tell them specific things and let them do what they will with it, and then he was upset about it. And this is getting me back to Game of Thrones and adaptations, because George R.R. Martin hasn't finished A Song of Ice and Fire, the main one, yet. He did finish Fire and Blood. Fire and Blood is a in-universe history textbook, or history book rather, about the Targaryen dynasty. And he has given them permission to adapt specific parts to the House of the Dragon. Season 2 is kind of weak for a lot of reasons, but there was a post that he made, George R.R. Martin made, I know I can find it, because he made this post talking about the butterfly effect on September 4th. And this got deleted. That's why we have to go to an archive version of it. Where he's like, he talks about specifically this one scene. And this is, again, spoilers. I'm not super worried about spoilers, though, for this. But it is spoilers and it is child murder. There's this scene in Fire and Blood that talks about Helena, who is the queen of Aegon II, who is one of two people that are vying for the throne. Helena has, in the book, she has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And this happens right after Rhaenyra, who is the other person trying to fight for the throne, Rhaenyra's younger second son died because her half-brother's dragon, took a chomp out of him. That's a whole thing. Basically, her second son died. He was killed at the hands of the Greens, which is Aegon and Helena's side. So, while she's so upset, her husband's like, okay, I'm going to hire these people to kill a son for a son. What's this? Where I was going with Cawthon doesn't allow anybody, 90% of your popular fan theories get debunked. Yeah, there's that too. And that's a thing. That's a thing, especially with Marvel movies, that's been happening, where they'll rewrite things to, purposefully make everything wrong. And that is why I don't really catch up with Marvel anymore, because they are trying to keep things so secret to the point that they don't even let the they haven't even. There was this time where they wouldn't even let the actors read the full script, and I'm just over here like, what happened to like fake movie names and leaking secret scripts? Like the way that Gravity Falls, Alex Hirsch dealt with something was l- leaking, quote unquote, leaking a screenshot or screen cell of Fiddleford being the author, and then him getting mad about it and and throwing people off. But he didn't change the story. He just made like a fake screenshot and pretended to be angry that someone had leaked an actual screenshot to kind of like try and make the trail go cold. One of the reasons why I think Steven Universe does really well is they foreshadowed Rose being Pink Diamond, and when people were guessing that from early on, they didn't change their mind. They just kept it going. A good story, a story isn't less good just because they people are able to guess your twists. If they're able to guess your twists, maybe do look and make sure that you aren't like selling everything immediately. But also, like, it could just mean that they're very, very invested in the story, like Gravity Falls people were, like FNAF people are. Like, goddamn, like Scott Cawthon, come on. The fact that people are invested in your game series so much that they want to tear it apart to figure out the lore, take it as a compliment and keep going and reward them. That goes into like the fan service thing. It's like fan service isn't just like sex appeal. Fan service can be a, oh, you guys really like these aspects. I'm going to give you more of that aspect as I'm continuing to tell my story. But going back to adaptations, Helena and Aegon of the Greens, they have 3 children in the book, and a son for a son happens. These 2 murderers called Blood and Cheese end up going in, and they tell Helena, pick a son to die. She picks her younger son, and they tell the younger son, hey, your mama wants you to die, and then kill the elder son. That sets off his whole thing. It's kind of like the beginning of the end for Helena in the history book, because she named a son to die. She had a son be killed. Then stuff happens. The 2 children she has left are smuggled out, and then the younger son still dies. He gets torn apart on a bridge by a bunch of small folk, a bunch of common people. And in the TV show, we don't have that son. So the story with Blood and Cheese is then they can't tell the twins apart because the older 2 children, the boy and the girl, are twins. So they're like, hey, Helena, which one's your boy? And Helena is a little bit different in the show as well. They don't talk about her much in the history book, but she seems to be fairly normal, quote unquote. In the show, she is a dreamer. She has visions of the future, and she is like emotionally withdrawn. She feels things very shallowly, it appears. She's very heavily autistically coded. And so she's already a little odd, but she does try to save her children. It doesn't work, and she ends up pointing out the boy. And there's this very sad moment because she's got the Cassandra curse where everything she says gets ignored. But for the first time, Cheese notices, looks at her. Blood's like, oh, she's lying. She wouldn't tell us which one is the son because the son is more valuable. Going back into the idea of like gender and women being disposable, that sort of thing. But Cheese looks in her eyes and is like, no, she's telling the truth. And it's the most heart-wrenching scene because you can hear them sawing off Jaehaerys's head, and I hate it so much. I don't want to rewatch it, but I have to rewatch it so I can catch up on things better. But we're talking about adaptation. They took out a child completely, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to bring that youngest son back in. So we can't have the youngest son later being torn apart. And that's important because in this blog post, George R. R. Martin is talking about how it's a butterfly effect. Without the youngest son, without the scene playing out how it did in the book, then we don't have Helena eventually committing suicide. And he puts such a big deal on this, but I have to admit, I just finished rereading this part. I've read to the dragons being killed by the small folk, and to be completely honest, he's putting more into it than his actual history book does. And that is something else, to be completely honest, because they give multiple different things of like what could have happened, and he's just putting so much on this one moment when there's so many other moments that you could be focusing on. Like, they've completely changed Alicent's trajectory as a character, and I don't know how they are going to resolve that, you know? But this blog post has sort of like started up this big ol' hey, everything is kind of shit, and what are we supposed to do? And season 2 is horrific. But I think there's other stuff that is to be worried about there. I did want to try and talk about Lily Orchard's writing. My discuss Lily Orchard. Lily has arrived. Why didn't I? Okay, here we go. Oh, it's so white. She only has 2 works in here? Okay. We'll look at Hand in Hand. A novelization of Baldur's Gate. You know, actually, I think I should probably leave this so that I can write and have notes on it first. So we're just going to hide this again, and we're going to go back to just yapping. I don't even remember what I was doing. I think I was taking down a place. But there's a lot to say about adaptations. The fact that A Game of Thrones, the series, goes off the rails very, very quickly because they try to take the magic out of A Song of Ice and Fire when it's supposed to be... They're trying to make it more realistic, which is at odds with how the actual story goes. Oops, why do I keep doing that? Because the story is very entrenched in magic. And going back to Lord of the Rings versus... don't mumble at me. Going back to the Lord of the Rings versus Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire series, and one being more character driven, one not. I think it's important to know that Lord of the Rings came first, and in many ways, A Song of Ice and Fire is a sort of, not a clapback, but a response to it. And I was thinking about this the other day, because I was thinking about how I wanted to think about, like, how is A Song of Ice and Fire going to end? I don't think it's going to end the way that the book did, if for no other reason than it's George R. R. Martin's already gotten that, like, a soft launch on that idea, and it was terrible, and everyone hated it. But also because, like I said, the TV show took the magic out. And it's especially noticeable in Jon Snow's character arc, because from the very beginning, Jon Snow has been changed to be kind of like a more noble figure, to be more selfless, and he is a selfless kid. That's another thing to remember, is like the characters in A Song of Ice and Fire are aged up in the TV show to try and diminish some of that creepiness that is inherent when you realize that Daenerys is like maybe 13 when she and Drogo are married and they have their wedding night. And the wedding night is it's written very much as like dubious consent to, or if we put it in modern lens, the whole thing is non-consent because she is a child. Within the lens of the story, it's more dubious consent because he he knows like one word in the common tongue, and it's no, and he waits until she says yes to do it, and at the same time he's like, I'm not going to go into explicitly like what he does because it's very sexually explicit. Again, George R. R. Martin has a thing where he likes to write about food and assault and women's bodies, and he writes them all kind of the same way. But after the first night with the dubious consent, it then goes into it's marital rape the entire time until she is able to like take control, take ownership of her body and try and be like, no, we're doing it this way. Then it becomes more consensual. As consensual as you can be with like a 13, 14, 15-year-old. But they take out a lot of the magic with Jon Snow's arc because like you take out the warging, especially because he's able to connect to his dire wolf ghost, and he's able to like work into them, and he has dreams, and Bran contacts him via dreams, and he has struggles, and there's all these different things that you just don't get to see in the actual. That was good timing. The little beat from Minecraft music starting to play. You don't get to see that in the actual show. So it can't end the way that it did in the show. I need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to do 2 9s. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just going to build like a little long home for them to sleep in. Hello, sheep. Also, has anyone seen the Minecraft trailer? The sheep are terrifying. Anyway, what I was going with is because I was thinking about that and thinking about the fact that the books can't end the way that the show did, if for no other reason than, again, he's already had a soft launch on that and that did not work, so he's not going to do that. There's this... The main characters who... That was absolutely genius, to be honest. What part was genius? The soft launch? It's like my chat decided to suddenly catch up with what what you were saying. So I'm just gonna wait a second and just build my little long house. I should probably go get some different woods. But for now, we'll stick with this. Okay, fair enough. Man, I hope there's something that I can make a video out of this later. Otherwise, it's going to be like just me yapping for ages, which isn't a bad thing. It just also is just a thing. But we're going to lay down this chest, and we're going to go gather wood from outside the fence once the sun goes up. But where did my words go again, guys? So I was thinking about the characters. I was thinking about Daenerys, specifically Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion. And again, I'm kind of stuck on the, do I need to give story for these guys? I'll give a little bit of story for these guys. So, Daenerys Targaryen there's multiple focal point characters, and I would consider Eddard Stark to be one of them too. But we'll start with Daenerys Targaryen. She is a young girl whose family used to rule Westeros, which is this giant continent that is in the west. That's why it's called Westeros. And her family, before the start of the book series, is killed and overthrown because this dude, Robert Baratheon, got pissed off, and the previous king, I should go back. Robert Baratheon got pissed off. He ends up becoming king, but before all that, there's this very horrible ruler. His name is Viserys, I believe. It's been a hot minute since I've read the actual like modern Game of Thrones lore versus and currently like 170 years behind the times with Fire and Blood. But he is a madman. The Targaryens are very much an incest family because they have to keep their bloodline pure because they used to be dragon riders. And the way to ride dragons for them was they had to have blood, Targaryen blood. He's a madman. He does all these horrible things. Is that another village? Oh, you motherfucker. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting myself to be like, if you weren't here at the last stream, I spent a good hour or so trying to find a village to turn into my home. And then I found that one over there completely by accident, just trying to explore and get some stuff for a base that I'd set up once I eventually gave up. Here's another fucking village. Fuck you. Fuck all of you. Where were you when I was looking for you guys? Sorry. That's amusing, though. God. It's like take two. Anyway. So, dude's... King is fucked up. King needs to be killed. King also, like, tortures Ned Starks, who's one of the original point of view characters, tortures his dad and his brother, his older brother, and makes Ned end up having to become the Lord Paramount of the North. Because there used to be roughly 7 kingdoms, kind of, and each kingdom got turned into a lordship. So each king that got appointed becomes a lord, and he's in charge of the North. The North is cold. The North is ice. The North is winter is coming. That's all you got to know about that for right now. Anyway, Daenerys is the youngest daughter of the Mad King. And she and her brother, her older brother, who might actually be Viserys and not the dad. It's hard for me to remember. You know what? Let me just write the Mad King. Mad King of England. That's funny. Aerys. Aerys is the Mad King. Viserys is the older brother. Or the middle brother in this case. They go to Essos, which is the continent in the east. Very easy to remember. We have Westeros and Essos. West and east. And they grow up over there. Dany has never been on mainland Westeros. And her brother is like, oh, we need to go back. That's our birthright, etc., etc., etc. He's a chip off the old block. He's Aerys writ small, I would say. Dany is like, but I like it here. Since she's not got any memories because she was a little baby when her father was killed and when her older brother was killed, and the usurper, when Robert Baratheon basically took over as king, because she was so young, she only remembers life as it is. She gets sold to Khal Drogo with the promise that once Khal Drogo is happy and has done everything that his culture has to do, and his culture is very based off of Mongolian culture. Uh, then he will go. He will give Viserys an army to take overseas to take his country back, and he gets Daenerys in return. So she ends up getting her own agency, and she's kind of like this the rightful heir that has been looked over because of her sex, and she's the rightful heir who wants to make everything right, essentially. I don't know what an easy trope would be to call her versus the regular, but she very much reminds me of like the stories where you have someone who is overlooked for their gender and has to kind of like fight their way into power, and has very, at the time, modern, like comparable to modern morality almost, or very near it, because she's anti-slavery. She tries to stop slavery in a town, in a city that's all about it, and she's basically like doing a dry run of her being Queen of Westeros before she goes over and takes over, and it doesn't go very well. So she's one of the main characters. Ned Stark is going to be another easy one. He is the honorable man, the man who cannot lie, and is he feels like he is the protagonist, the main protagonist, and you want to root for him, and you want to see him succeed, even when things start going wrong. Towards the end of the first book, you're reading it and you're like, okay, he's in a bad place, but everything's going to be fine. They've already figured out how they're going to like pardon him, so he's not going to die, because he figures out all of these different complicated things that's not super important to what I'm talking about, and he gets imprisoned and he's going to be executed, but everything that they want is being done, so they're going to stay the execution, right? He's going to be able to like just go and be exiled. No, he gets killed. That's the end of the first book. That's the end of the first season. And so that's an easy example of the subversion of what you might expect from a fantasy story, and kind of a clue of what I'm expecting to see happen to Daenerys and to Jon. Jon Snow is he is a bastard. That's why his last name is Snow. Each of the regions have a different like bastard last name that they're supposed to take on to show that they don't have a father and they were born out of wedlock. That sort of thing. So he's a Snow. He is thought to be Eddard's or Ned's bastard. But Jon ends up being like this focal point of a lot of prophecy and the focal point of a lot of magic, because he's secretly a Targaryen. As it turns out, his Daenerys and Viserys had an older brother, and this older brother, he was set to be king. He ends up being killed by Robert Baratheon before Robert becomes the next king, and there's insinuations that he either like assaulted or had an affair, or even was a true romance, we don't know which one, with Ned Stark's sister. One of these things happened, but in the show it's confirmed. In the books it's very heavily implied that Jon is a Stark and a Targaryen. He is a prince. He is the unknown prince, essentially. And he is the center of many prophecies. And he's got all of this stuff going up where he is also set up to be like this magical protagonist in a fantasy book that would allow for him to like become king. And Tyrion is the last one. Tyrion Lannister. He is the youngest son of the Lord Paramount of the West, or the former Lord Paramount of the West. The Lannisters are known for being extremely rich, extremely wealthy. his older sister, Cersei, ends up marrying Robert, so she becomes queen. And her sons are set up to be the next rulers. Tyrion is also a dwarf. You might be familiar with his character because he was played by Peter Dinklage in the show. And Peter Dinklage is a very good-looking man. Tyrion doesn't look like that in the books, for one. But the way that Tyrion is set up is he's set up to be like this overlooked character who has been abused because of his minority status, even though he is nobility, and he would make, if not a good ruler himself, he's still like overlooked, but a good person and a good person to have in charge. In truth, all of these characters, I think, Ned being the most obvious in the fact that he didn't even get to live, and the others in their own ways. I thought there was like a chest down here. I was mistaken. Let's go back up. Okay, so what I was saying. Ned and the fact that he didn't even get to live, he didn't survive. That was the first big, oh, what the fuck moment of the series that told you you're not reading your average fantasy story. But Daenerys trying to do her thing and failing. So her methods of like, we're going to ban slavery and everything's going to be fine. And I'm going to be able to do this because I'm supposed to be in control. It doesn't look like it's shaping up so well for her. I feel like she is going to become... There's a very good chance that she's either going to have to... She's going to become a tyrant and or have to be killed and sacrificed. Then we have Jon, who I feel like is going to get the Frodo treatment. Frodo from Lord of the Rings, where he was the subject of the center of the story and like subjected to all this stuff, but is irrevocably changed and can't go back to it. And I think George R. R. Martin is trying to do a quote-unquote more realistic version of that. And then Tyrion, in the books, he's already like being downfall. He's already like getting everything kicked out, all the crap kicked out of him. He absolutely was not as effective a leader as he thought he was. And there's a lot. But I've been thinking about those characters a lot. That's why I've been thinking about like how things will turn out when they turn out. And also just, I don't know. I really went off the beaten path here. I realized I was supposed to be talking about Lily Orchard's writing today. But definitely did not do that. I could complain more about Scott Cawthon and FNAF. Like, that wouldn't bother me. That wouldn't bother me in the least. But I think after I get done with the basics of this shoebox, I'm going to call it because my throat's already hurting. And I don't want to have another 5-hour video to eventually go through. But no, I think... I don't even remember what all I've been talking about today. That's kind of bad. I'm sorry, guys. I am not good at the streaming thing yet. Other than talking. I'm good at talking. I should also say, I may show you guys before I quit for the day. It's funny because I created an easy world for just peaceful play. Mostly to get used to using a keyboard and a mouse, because I've only really ever played Minecraft on a laptop. And similar thing, I wanted to find a village to kind of create as my home base, and I started terraforming it, and at some point I was like, I need to go and do something. I don't remember what I needed to do at the time, but I needed to go and do it. And I ended up wandering off, and I ended up finding another village that's like right next to this, the one that I started at. And it's just like, dang, what the heck? How does this keep happening? This is now the second time that I've done this. And so it's just, so I may show that off. It's a different setting, so I don't have to deal with storms, which is nice, but it's going to be a challenge because I'm going to be building in the plain, not the plains, but the one with the acacia trees. And it doesn't have the prettiest grass, so I don't know what I'm going to do. But I'll figure it out. But yeah, I think me talking about Game of Thrones, I probably don't have a video out of any of this. God, no, but, okay, Scott Cawthon really fucking pissed me off with his thing. And he really pisses me off as a writer who works extremely hard on his work. Seeing him be like, oh, you guys are figuring this out, I'm going to change it. Even though it seemed like for the longest time he was actually playing along with, like, MatPat especially, it seemed like he was enjoying it. And it's like, if I ever make something even a quarter as successful as FNAF, I'm 100% going to be like, oh my gosh, you guys love this, you guys are figuring it out. I'm going to make sure that I tell it in the best way I possibly can, because, like, that's deserved. Like, people who are spending that much time loving your work to dissect it to that level deserve to have that amount of attention brought back to it. Scott Cawthon can kind of go eat a dick, honestly. And so can people who think that, like, they are entitled to everything because they have written fan fiction for stuff. I don't know. Like, being a writer and creating stuff is very good. It's a lot of work, and I commend people who do it as someone who struggles a lot. But, like, just because you're writing fan fiction of some characters, even if they're, like, real people, it doesn't give you the right to be like, oh, they will never understand. Because, again, it's just, there's this flattening effect that fan fiction does over time. And it's just something to be aware of. It is funny when it happens to, like, characters who basically don't have personalities, though. I have to admit, like, it tickles me a little bit to see characters like Sun and Moon getting flattened, and it's like, how are you doing this? They barely have characters already. How are you making them into something they are so clearly not? Also did not find any spruce. That's sad. I think my floor is going to be birch. I don't think I have enough birch to do, like, it would be nice. I have to go get some more. They do like their fanfic tropes. They like their fanfic tropes, and that's fine. At the end of the day, I really am not someone who wants to yuck anyone's yum, but just at some point, you might as well just write your own original work around those tropes. And I got feelings about the fucking... Like, can we discuss how, like, Book Talk has, like, poisoned people's brains in how they need to advertise their writing? As, like, I'm being told, it's Star-Crossed Lovers, X, Ghost Boys, X, whatever, Sanquin Villain, I don't know, I'm not good with tropes, off the top of my head, but I'm being advertised, like, if you like these tropes, you'll like this story, and it's like, okay, but I want to know what the actual story is. It's like the enshittification process of book covers, where the book covers, have gotten worse and worse over time, and part of that is I can no longer look at a book cover and read what the story is about. I get to read reviews. Or now, I get to read it's this X this X this, or it's like Hunger Games. Oh, Lightlark. Hunger Games if magic. Which Lightlark is not. Lightlark is so bad. Lightlark also has that problem of repeating the same information too many times in a row. I think I have my cut of Lightlark taking out all the extraneous detail that was not needed somewhere. Actually, I know I do. But I need to cut down birch trees. But I kind of want to talk about it. But I need to cut down birch trees. And it's been a while since I've talked about Lightlark at all, so I may need to refresh my memory. But I do remember Lightlark was being advertised as Hunger Games-esque. And I could see where they were wanting to try and have that. But like the author, I think her name is Alex Astor, messed it up so bad, dudes. Like, one of the things about Hunger Games was that it's a spectacle, it's a horrific spectacle of watching a small group of people who don't have any agency being forced to kill for both entertainment and as a warning to the districts of like, this is what's going to happen if you revolt again. Again, stealing that little phrase from George R. R. Martin, it's the genocide writ small again. Will you let me sleep? And something I like about Suzanne Collins' writing is it seems like every time she comes out with further bits about her work, like, what's the new... She's writing something else now, or she's published something else. Okay, fuck it. Let's look it up. Suzanne Collins. It would help if I can spell. Hello. So we got Hunger Games. Sunrise on the Reaping is the next one. What is Gregor the Overlander? A children's... Okay, let's see. Epic fantasy novel. It was written by Suzanne Collins and written and published in 2003 as first book in... Okay. I may be adding this to my list of things because I did not know that she wrote this. She has an epic fantasy series. It looks like Gregor the Overlander, Prophecy of the Bane, The Curse of the Warm Bloods, The Marks of Secret, The Code of Claw. It's published in between 2003 and 2007. Huh. Oh, I'm fascinated by this. Okay. That's something that I'm going to have to read, because I did not know she wrote those. But every time she writes something in the Hunger Games series, it seems like she is tackling something new. And... Motherfucker, I forgot what I was talking about. I got so distracted by the fact that she has written a fantasy series that I actually forgot the point of why I brought Suzanne Collins up. I'm very sorry, guys. Yeah, same cow. I like Suzanne Collins too. I think she's a really good writer. I think, again, she hits that writing that is tight, like Terry Pratchett does, but she does describe things in very well without being... I don't think extra is the right word. Give me your meat. Now I'm remembering salmon heats. Okay. Um, she writes about gruesome subjects, not in a way that doesn't feel voyeuristic, if that makes sense. As opposed to, say, again, George R. R. Martin and his the wedding night with Khal Drogo and Daenerys. That was very voyeuristic and not entirely pleasant to read about in a way that I don't think he actually intended. I should keep cutting down birch trees and not just be like. So there's this realm of like Suzanne Collins. I like her writing. Terry Pratchett, Lemony Snicket. These are all writers that I really like their stuff versus Cemetery Boys, which is a little heavy-handed in the descriptions, a little heavy-handed in the YA style, not the YA, the Tumblr-esque style of writing, which, again, isn't bad. But when I can tell there's... I don't know how to describe it, because it's both fan fiction-esque, but also a very specific type of, like, you can tell when someone has written in a certain way for a very long time and they're trying their hand at something new. They may go overboard in the opposite direction. And it makes me wonder if his other writing is less overwritten in some aspects. But it is interesting to be talking about this, and I am thinking about, because I have read snippets of Lily Orchard's writing, I am not overly impressed by it, especially given the fact that she purports herself as a professional. And with that, I expect a certain level of polish that she does not have as a writer yet. And I don't think, given the way that she likes to shoot, blow herself up, or whatever, as much as she does, I don't think she's ever going to have that level of polish that is something that it is important for, especially if you're doing something like self-publishing. Because self-publishing, it can be expensive to get an editor, and actually I feel like fan fiction is a great way to get used to like self-editing and to start responding to feedback and starting to understand your audience well. Like, I learned about beta readers through fan fiction. I learned about sensitivity readers through fan fiction. I learned all of these things that are really, really good for like self-publishing and professional publishing that you would not get. I wouldn't have learned about through like just reading NaNoWriMo forums, which NaNoWriMo is its own thing. Also, can I just say, I was trying to find something to read earlier today to try and get my brain from breaking like it's been doing the past 5 days. And freaking, there's a tag on a fic that said AI generated text, and it's like, why? I don't want to. I don't. What did it? It was like assisted or something, not fully written by AI, I think. But at the same time, it's like, no. If I don't know what level of work the AI had with it, because I didn't even open it up. But if you're not willing to like write the words yourself, I don't really want to read it. And it sounds a little tiny bit hypocritical of me, because I have used AI to try and like, I've used AI once or twice, mostly if I get stuck in trying to name something. I'm not going to feed you the AI. Maybe I'll feed you to the AI. But one of the things I got stuck on for a really long time on what to name my comic Thread Hunters. And I will admit that ChatGPT is what helped me come up with the name. Not because it came up with the name itself, but because like I got more angry working with it than I knew what to deal with. So I just was like, you know what? I'm going with the worst idea possible, and we're just going to stick with it. But other than that, I don't think I've really used it. I talked to some printmakers, some professional printmakers and book artists, and they're like, I think the most that they have ever used it for is trying to figure out, like, what should I call my piece so it's not just untitled? And I can see the merit in small things like that, but writing fan fiction, writing fiction, period, seems very disingenuous. Oh, I remember what I was talking about. I was talking about Lightlark. How did disingenuity make me think of that? Okay, so Suzanne Collins had a very big point to make with her series, and it was very focused on the gruesomeness. There was and about keeping the districts in their place. Lightlark doesn't have that. Lightlark is very much like a wish fulfillment. And the thing that gets me the most is the fact that it kind of also just it's not well written. And I've laid this down so I can actually pull this up. Let's get rid of you. We're going to... I should really rename my screen captures. Show? Why are you not showing anything? Are you showing anything now? Yes, you are. Okay. Where's my mouse? Nope. I've lost my mouse, guys. Found it. No, I haven't. Shit, what did I just do? It's gone. My mouse is gone. Okay. So, I don't have my mouse. I'm trying. There we go. So one of the things I want to do eventually, my mouse is still missing. Maybe I should try and figure out how to bring that back. Okay, give me, there. Mouse, invisible. It's like we're having technical issues. Go to Settings, Devices, Mouse. Okay. Issue. I can't... Okay, here we go. Settings, Bluetooth and Devices. Mouse. Mouse buttons. Additional mouse settings. Okay, it would help if I could see it. Oh no, what did I do? Guys, I lost my mouse. I don't know what to do. Open pointers, options tab, uncheck option, hide mouse. Okay. New problem is I can pull open the tab, but I can't seem to grab it. So I think we're going to end the stream here while I figure this out, because this is a nightmare. This is actually a nightmare. But thank y'all for being here. Thank you, Mitch and Molly, who went to work, for talking with me. And I hope something interesting comes out of this. I honestly don't know. Next week, so long as things go well, because next week is the first. So long as things go well and my work schedule allows me, I will be back streaming again about 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm going to actually try and be ready to talk about Lily Orchard's writing and discuss it on a more technical level than I was here. Okay, so thank you again. I'll talk to y'all later. Now I get to try and figure out how to end my stream.